The notification sound from my laptop felt like a death knell in the quiet of our shared apartment. Repository deleted dot. The words glowed mockingly on my screen, and beneath them a timestamp that made my blood run cold. 3:47 a.m. I'd been asleep for exactly 4 hours after pulling another all-nighter, perfecting the machine learning algorithm that would revolutionize financial data visualization. 6 months of work, 6 months of sleepless nights, coffee-stained notebooks, and dreams deferred. Gone. Maya! Derek's voice drifted from the bedroom, groggy and falsely concerned. Everything okay out there? My fingers trembled as I clicked through the commit history, desperately hoping this was some nightmare I'd wake up from. But there it was, clear as the morning light creeping through our blinds. Derek_Chen deleted repository finance viz AI. 47 commits, 23 branches, 8 months of development. Maya, babe, come back to bed. His footsteps patted across the hardwood floor, and I felt his hands settle on my shoulders with the same touch that once comforted me through debugging sessions and venture capital rejections. Now it felt like betrayal made manifest. I turned slowly, my eyes meeting his in the dim glow of my monitors. There was something there. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. The Derek I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago at MIT's hackathon would never have looked at me like that. You deleted it, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of my cooling fans. His face went through a series of micro-expressions I'd learned to read during our years together. Surprise, then a flash of something darker. Then that practice smile he'd been perfecting since landing his senior developer role at Zenith Corp. Maya, I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe there was a sync error? You know how GitHub can be with large repositories? But I knew. The way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, the slight tightening around his mouth, the defensive posture he'd adopted without realizing it. In my first life, the one where I'd trusted him completely, I'd missed these signs. This time, with the bitter wisdom of betrayal already etched into my soul, I saw them clearly, in my first life. The thought still felt surreal, even months after waking up in this second chance. I died at 32, broke and broken, watching Derek present my algorithm to Zenith's board as his own innovation. The betrayal had been so complete, so devastating that my heart had simply stopped beating in that sterile conference room. But somehow, I'd been given another chance. I'd woken up on my 28th birthday, 4 years in the past, with all my memories intact. I'd spent months trying to convince myself it was just an elaborate dream, but the evidence was overwhelming. I remembered every conversation, every betrayal, every moment of manipulation that led to my destruction. This time would be different. The commit logs show your administrator access, I said quietly, pulling up the audit trail I'd learned to screenshot obsessively in this second life. 3:47 a.m. Permanent deletion. All branches, all history. Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the calculation behind his eyes. He was weighing his options, determining how to play this. In my first life, this was where he'd gaslit me into believing I'd made a mistake, that I was being paranoid, that stress was making me imagine things. Look, Maya, I know you've been under a lot of pressure with the beta launch next week. Maybe you should take a break, get some perspective. Stop! The word came out sharp enough to cut. Just stop! I stood up, my chair rolling backward into the wall with a soft thud. The morning light was stronger now, casting long shadows across our apartment. His apartment, I realized. Another detail I'd been blind to before. The lease was in his name, the utilities, everything. I'd been paying half of everything while building my future on a foundation of sand. I know what you did, Derek. I know about the meeting with Johnson tomorrow. I know about the presentation you've been preparing with my algorithm. I know about the equity deal Zenith offered you. His face went pale. In my first life, I'd only learned about these details after it was too late, through fragments of overheard conversations and bitter discoveries after my professional funeral. But this time, I'd been watching, listening, preparing. Maya, you're being paranoid. We're partners. We've always been partners. Partners. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Partners don't delete their partner's life work 3 days before the most important presentation of their career. I moved to my backup laptop, the one Derek didn't know about, and began typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard with the muscle memory of someone who'd coded their way through heartbreak before. What are you doing? There was an edge in his voice now, the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. What I should have done months ago, what I should have done the moment I realized what kind of man you really are. The backup repository came alive on my screen. Not the main project. That was indeed gone. But something better, something I'd been building in secret since my second chance began. While Derek thought he was manipulating me, I'd been 3 steps ahead, preparing for this exact moment. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stream goes live in 2 hours. Everything ready on our end. A. Alexander Winters. In my first life, I'd known him only as Derek's rival, the founder of Apex Dynamics who'd tried and failed to recruit Derek away from Zenith. But in this life, I'd reached out first, carefully, strategically. A casual message about machine learning applications, a few technical discussions, then a coffee meeting that had changed everything. Who's A? Derek had moved behind me, reading over my shoulder with the casual invasion of privacy that had once seemed endearing. Someone who appreciates innovation, someone who doesn't steal from their partners. I could feel him processing this, his mind racing through possibilities. Derek was intelligent. I'd never doubted that. But intelligence without integrity was just another form of stupidity. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Alexander's face appeared on screen, sharp-featured and intense, with silver threading through his dark hair that spoke of late nights, building his empire from nothing. Maya, ready for today? More than ready. I angled the screen so Derek couldn't see clearly, but I caught his reflection in the black surface of my monitor, his expression shifting from confusion to growing alarm. The beta performs beautifully in our tests. Jenkins has the streaming infrastructure set up, and we've got 3 venture capital firms confirmed as live viewers: Whitmore Capital, Genesis Partners, and Meridian Ventures. My heart rate spiked. Those were the same firms that had rejected my proposals in my first life, often without even a courtesy meeting. Whitmore had been particularly dismissive, with Marcus Whitmore himself suggesting I find a technical co-founder to make my ideas viable. Perfect. I'll be ready to demonstrate in... I checked the time, 90 minutes. Maya. Derek's voice had changed, taken on a tone I recognized from my first life, the one he used when he was about to gaslight me into doubting my own reality. What exactly is going on here? I ended the call and turned to face him fully. 3 years together. 3 years of shared dreams, late-night coding sessions, promises of building something amazing together. 3 years of him slowly, systematically undermining my confidence while positioning himself to steal everything I created. What's going on is that I learned from my mistakes. What mistakes? Maya, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. You're right. The old Maya would have cried. She would have believed your lies about sync errors and stress. She would have let you convince her that she was imagining things, that partnerships meant shared ownership of ideas, that love meant trusting someone completely even when every instinct screamed otherwise. I pulled up my streaming software, adjusting the camera angle and checking the lighting. Behind me, Derek was pacing now, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. The old Maya would have watched you present her algorithm to Zenith's board tomorrow. She would have sat in the audience, believing your promise that you'd credit her contribution, that this was just the beginning of our joint success. My voice was steady now, cold and precise as lines of code. She would have believed you right up until the moment you signed that equity deal with your name alone on the patent application. Derek stopped pacing. The color had drained from his face completely. How do you... Maya, I haven't done any of that. You're talking like it already happened. Because it did happen, just not in this timeline. I know how it sounds. Insane, impossible, the ravings of someone who'd finally cracked under pressure. But I'd stopped caring about sounding sane months ago. Sanity was trusting Derek. Sanity was believing that love meant anything in the face of ambition. Sanity was dying broke and betrayed, while your former partner became a millionaire off your work. You're having some kind of breakdown, Derek said, but his voice shook. Maybe we should call your sister, or Jenna knows. I smiled for the first time that morning, remembering the conversation with my sister 6 months ago. In my first life, Jenna had tried to warn me about Derek, but I'd been too blinded by love to listen. This time, I'd called her the moment I'd confirmed my suspicions about Derek's true nature. I knew that bastard was up to something, she'd said, her lawyer instincts in full display. What do you need me to do? My phone showed a text from her now. All legal docs filed. Patent applications submitted under your name with priority dating. You're covered, sis. Derek's phone started ringing. He glanced at it and I saw his face go white. It's Johnson. Robert Johnson, Zenith's CTO. The man who would have been Derek's pathway to stolen success. The man who was probably calling to ask why the repository he'd been promised access to was suddenly empty. Answer it, I suggested sweetly. Derek declined the call, but it immediately started ringing again. Maya, whatever you think you know, whatever game you think you're playing, it stops now. Delete whatever backup you have. Cancel whatever meeting you've set up. We can work this out. Work it out? I laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. Like we worked out the funding meetings you took without me? Like we worked out the investor presentations where you somehow forgot to mention your partner's contributions? Like we worked out the equity discussions where my name never appeared? I was protecting you. The tech world is brutal for women, especially in AI. I was building credibility so we could both succeed. There it was. The same lie he'd used in my first life, dressed up as noble sacrifice. Protection. As if stealing someone's work was a form of love. Protecting me by deleting my life's work 3 days before the biggest presentation of my career? I didn't. He stopped, realizing the futility of the lie. My streaming software chimed. 15 minutes to go live. I did a final check of my setup, 3 monitors displaying different aspects of my algorithm, a whiteboard with technical diagrams, and a camera angle that made me look confident and professional rather than like someone who'd been betrayed by the person they trusted most. Maya, please, don't do this. Don't destroy us over a misunderstanding. I'm not destroying us, Derek. You did that the moment you decided my trust was worth less than your ambition. I'm just cleaning up the aftermath. I opened my revised algorithm. Not the one Derek had stolen, but the one I'd been perfecting in secret. The one that took everything I'd learned in my first life and pushed it 3 generations beyond what Derek even knew was possible. While he'd been stealing version 1.0, I'd been building 3.0. My phone buzzed with notifications. Alexander's team had started promoting the stream across social media, positioning it as a stealth startup reveal by a mysterious AI innovator. The venture capital world was small and incestuous. They'd all be watching. You know what the really sad part is? I said, making final adjustments to my presentation notes. In another life, we could have been genuine partners. You're talented, Derek. You could have built something amazing of your own instead of stealing mine. I never stole anything. We worked on this together. Did we? Show me one line of the core algorithm you contributed. Show me one architectural decision you made. Show me anything in that repository that came from your mind instead of mine. Silence. We both knew the truth. You were the front man, Derek. The charming MIT graduate who could sweet-talk investors and make them believe in the vision. But the vision was always mine. The code was always mine. The breakthrough was always mine. 5 minutes to stream start, I applied a touch of lipstick, not for vanity, but for war paint. In my first life, I'd learned that women in tech had to be twice as good and twice as polished to get half the recognition. This time, I was ready. Don't do this, Maya. Whatever you're planning, it'll destroy both of us. No, Derek, it'll destroy you. I've already been destroyed once. This is reconstruction. The stream went live. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maya Chen, and I'm about to show you the future of financial AI. I could see the viewer count climbing rapidly. 50, 100, 200. Alexander's marketing had worked. The vultures were gathering. 3 years ago, I began developing an algorithm that could predict market movements, with unprecedented accuracy by analyzing not just traditional financial data, but behavioral patterns in social media, news sentiment, and even weather data to create a truly comprehensive predictive model. Behind me, Derek was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to reach Johnson, trying to do damage control on a situation that was already beyond his control. The algorithm uses a novel approach to machine learning that I call contextual weight distribution. Essentially, it doesn't just analyze data points, it understands the relationships between seemingly unrelated variables. I pulled up the first demonstration, a real-time analysis of stock movements that the algorithm had predicted with 94% accuracy over the past 6 months. The chat was exploding. Usernames I recognized from the tech industry, venture capitalists, even a few competitors, all watching as I systematically destroyed the narrative Derek had been building. Now, some of you might be wondering why you're seeing this from me instead of from Zenith Corporation, where a similar project has been in development. Derek made a choking sound behind me. The answer is simple. Innovation belongs to the innovator, not to the person who steals it. I pulled up the patent filings, all dated with my name as the sole inventor, all filed months before Derek's planned presentation to Zenith. This is what real intellectual property looks like, not stolen code presented by someone who contributed nothing but charm and manipulation. The viewer count had hit 500. I could see venture capital firm domains in the chat, could see the excitement building as they realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, a live demolition of corporate theft. Let me demonstrate the current version of the algorithm with a live prediction. I pulled up the interface I'd spent months perfecting, clean and intuitive, where Derek's stolen version had been clunky and rushed. The algorithm analyzed current market conditions, processed thousands of data points, and generated predictions for the next trading day. Based on current sentiment analysis, unusual options activity, and 36 other factors, the algorithm predicts that Zenith Corporation stock will drop by approximately 12% over the next week. Derek's phone started ringing again, then mine, then his again. This prediction is based on several factors the algorithm has identified: leadership instability, intellectual property concerns, and what appears to be a pattern of misrepresentation in their AI development claims. I was walking a fine line here, careful not to make any claims I couldn't prove, but letting the implications hang in the air like smoke. The algorithm also predicts significant movement in the stealth startup sector, particularly for companies that can demonstrate genuine innovation rather than borrowed technology. The chat was moving too fast to read now. I caught fragments. Holy shit. Is she destroying Zenith live? Who is this woman? Where can I invest? Now, let me show you something really interesting. I pulled up the comparison I'd been saving for this moment. Derek's version of the algorithm versus my current version, running on the same historical data. The results weren't even close. Version 1.0, which some companies may be basing their valuations on, achieves roughly 76% accuracy in market predictions. Version 3.0, which you're seeing demonstrated here, consistently performs at 94% accuracy. Behind me, Derek had gone completely silent. I could feel him watching the screen, watching his entire future crumble in real time. The difference isn't just incremental improvement, it's a fundamental architectural evolution that took months of additional development by someone who understood the core principles deeply enough to innovate beyond the initial concept. My phone was buzzing constantly now with messages, calls, notifications. I ignored them all. For the venture capital firms watching this stream, I want to be very clear about what you're seeing. This isn't just a product demonstration. It's a case study in why due diligence matters, why technical leadership matters, and why betting on the wrong horse can cost you the race. I pulled up my final slide. Contact information for Alexander Winters and Apex Dynamics, along with a brief overview of our partnership. Apex Dynamics has been working with me for the past 6 months to develop this technology. We'll be announcing our Series A funding round next week, led by partners who understand the value of authentic innovation. The chat exploded. I could see usernames from major VC firms, could see the feeding frenzy beginning as they realized they'd been watching the birth of the next major fintech unicorn. This concludes today's demonstration. For those interested in learning more, my contact information is available through Apex Dynamics. For those who may have been misled about the origins of this technology, I looked directly into the camera. Due diligence is a beautiful thing. I ended the stream. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Derek sat heavily on the couch, his phone still buzzing with what I assumed were increasingly frantic calls from Zenith. "You've destroyed everything," he said quietly. "I've destroyed your ability to steal from me. Your actual capabilities remain intact. You're still intelligent, still charming, still technically competent. You could build something real if you wanted to. Zenith will never recover from this. Johnson will be fired. The whole AI division. We'll have to actually innovate instead of stealing. Tragic." I was already packing my laptop, gathering the few personal items I'd brought to this apartment over the years. In my first life, I'd been so entangled with Derek that separating our lives had seemed impossible. This time, I'd been careful to keep everything important in my own name. "Maya, please. We can fix this. We can tell them it was a mistake, that you were having some kind of episode. The kind of episode where I remember things that haven't happened yet? Where I know about conversations you haven't had? Where I predicted your exact betrayal months in advance?" I shouldered my bag and headed for the door. "Goodbye, Derek. In another life, you might have been a better man. In this one, you chose to be a thief." "Maya, wait." But I was already gone, stepping out into the morning sunlight with the weight of betrayal finally lifted from my shoulders. My phone was ringing. Alexander, probably ready to discuss the next phase of our partnership. Or maybe one of the VC firms from the stream, eager to get in on the ground floor of what they'd just witnessed. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Alexander's corner office, watching Zenith's stock price drop in real time. The algorithm's prediction had been conservative. They were down 15% and falling. "The stream has been viewed over 10,000 times already," Alexander said, sliding a tablet across his desk. "We're getting calls from firms I've never even heard of." I scrolled through the messages, the funding offers, the partnership proposals. In my first life, these same people had dismissed me without a second thought. Now they were fighting for my attention. "There's something else," Alexander continued. "Johnson was terminated an hour ago. Zenith's board called an emergency meeting to discuss irregularities in their AI development program." I felt a moment of satisfaction, sharp and clean as a blade. Not because Johnson was a bad person, he wasn't, but because actions had consequences, and enabling theft should cost something. "Derek's been calling my office all morning," Alexander added. "My assistant says he sounds desperate." He should be. His entire career was built on a foundation of lies. When that crumbles, there's nothing left to support the structure. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Holy shit, Maya. I just watched your stream. You magnificent, terrifying genius. Call me." Another from my college roommate. "Did you just destroy your ex-boyfriend's career on livestream? Because if so, that's the most savage thing I've ever seen, and I'm incredibly proud of you." And one from an unknown number that made my heart race. "Miss Chen, this is Marcus Whitmore from Whitmore Capital. After watching your demonstration this morning, I'd like to discuss a potential investment opportunity. Are you available for lunch tomorrow?" Marcus Whitmore, the same man who'd suggested I find a technical co-founder because clearly a woman couldn't understand the complexities of AI development. Now he wanted to buy me lunch. "The irony is perfect," I told Alexander, showing him the message. "You're going to make them all pay, aren't you?" He was smiling, but there was something almost predatory in his expression. "Everyone who dismissed you, everyone who enabled Derek's theft, everyone who bet against you. I'm going to succeed so completely that their dismissal becomes a case study in how bias costs money. I'm going to build something so revolutionary that they'll spend years trying to understand how they missed it." "And Derek?" I considered the question. In my first life, Derek's betrayal had consumed me, eaten me alive from the inside, until there was nothing left but bitterness and rage. But this time felt different, cleaner. Derek chose his path. He could have been my partner, my equal, my collaborator. Instead, he chose to be my parasite. Now he'll have to live with the consequences of that choice. My phone rang. Alexander's assistant's voice came through the speaker. Mr. Winters, there's a Derek Chen here to see Miss Chen. He says it's urgent. Alexander looked at me, eyebrows raised in question. Send him up, I said. This should be interesting. 5 minutes later, Derek walked into the office looking like he'd aged 5 years in one morning. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a very bad few hours. Maya, thank God, we need to talk. We're talking now. Alexander, this is Derek Chen, my former partner. Derek, this is Alexander Winters, my actual partner. Derek's eyes flicked between us, trying to process the dynamics, the obvious comfort Alexander and I shared, the way we'd positioned ourselves as allies against a common threat. Maya, you have to call them off. Zenith's legal team is threatening to sue you for corporate espionage, trade secret theft, defamation. With what evidence? I was genuinely curious. I demonstrated technology I developed using algorithms I invented based on research I conducted. What exactly did I steal? The base code, the initial framework, was mine. Check the commit history on the original repository. Check the patents I filed 6 months ago. Check the research papers I published under my own name. Derek's face crumpled. Maya, please. They fired Johnson. They're shutting down the entire AI division. People are losing their jobs because of what you did. People are losing jobs because their company based a major strategic initiative on stolen technology. That's not my fault. It's Zenith's. But you could fix it. You could license the technology to them, work out some kind of deal. So they can continue profiting from my work while giving me a fraction of the credit and a fraction of the money? I shook my head. I tried partnership, Derek. You taught me exactly how much it was worth. Alexander stood up, his presence suddenly commanding the room. Mr. Chen, I think you misunderstand the situation. Maya isn't destroying your career out of spite. She's protecting her intellectual property and building her own future. The fact that your future was dependent on stealing hers isn't her problem to solve. You don't understand. Maya and I were, I corrected, past tense. We were partners. We were lovers. We were planning a future together, but that was before you decided my trust was worth less than your ambition. Derek looked around the office, at the awards on Alexander's walls, the photographs of him with tech industry leaders, the obvious markers of success and power. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage something from this disaster. What do you want? He asked finally. Money, credit, an apology? What will it take to fix this? Nothing you can give me because I don't need anything from you anymore. 6 months ago, I might have accepted an apology. 3 months ago, I might have settled for shared credit. Yesterday, I might have been willing to negotiate some kind of licensing deal. I stood up, walking to the window that looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, venture capitalists were watching replays of my stream. Tech blogs were writing articles about the mystery AI genius, and the future I'd been denied in my first life was finally taking shape. But today I have everything I need. I have my technology, my freedom, my integrity, and partners who respect my contributions. I have investors lining up to fund my vision, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that merit won out over manipulation. So, Maya, you're being vindictive. This isn't like you. I turned back to face him, and I let him see exactly who I'd become. Not the naive woman who'd trusted him with everything, but the architect of her own justice. You're right. This isn't like the Maya you knew. That Maya died the day she realized the man she loved had been systematically stealing her life's work. This Maya learned from her mistakes. Derek's phone started ringing again. He glanced at it and winced. It's the lawyers. Then you should probably take that call, and Derek. I waited until he looked at me directly. Next time you build a career, try building it on something that actually belongs to you. He left without another word, and I could hear his voice in the hallway, already spinning a new narrative, already trying to minimize the damage. But it was too late for damage control. The story was already out there, spreading through the tech industry gossip networks with the speed of fiber optic cables. Harsh, Alexander commented. Necessary, I replied. In my first life, mercy got me killed. In this one, justice keeps me alive. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus Whitmore. I've reviewed your patent filings and technical papers. Extremely impressive work. Would you be available for dinner tonight instead of lunch tomorrow? I'd like to discuss a significant investment opportunity. I showed the message to Alexander, who whistled low. Whitmore doesn't change his schedule for anyone. You've got them all scrambling. Good. They should scramble. They should wonder how they missed something so obvious. They should question every assumption they've made about who gets to innovate in this industry. As the afternoon wore on, the calls and messages kept coming. Venture capital firms, tech blogs wanting interviews, former colleagues who'd suddenly remembered my existence. The stream had done more than demonstrate my technology. It had announced the arrival of someone who wouldn't be dismissed, stolen from, or underestimated again. At 6 p.m., Alexander and I walked out of his office building together, heading to dinner with Marcus Whitmore and two other investors who'd managed to secure last-minute invitations to what was already being called the most important stealth startup meeting of the year. Any regrets? Alexander asked as we waited for our car. I thought about Derek, probably sitting in some lawyer's office right now, trying to explain how his entire career had been built on technology he couldn't actually demonstrate or improve. I thought about Johnson, clearing out his office after 20 years at Zenith. I thought about all the people who'd chosen to enable theft instead of recognizing innovation. None, I said, and meant it completely. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place where deals got made and futures got decided. Marcus Whitmore was already waiting at a corner table, looking like the kind of man who'd built an empire on knowing which bets to make and which to avoid. Miss Chen, he stood as we approached, I have to admit I've never seen anything quite like your presentation this morning. Thank you for making time on such short notice. After what I witnessed today, I wouldn't have slept tonight without having this conversation. As we sat down, I noticed his tablet was already open to my technical specifications. He'd done his homework just like I'd done mine months ago when I'd started planning this exact moment. I'll be direct, Whitmore continued. 3 years ago, you approached my firm with a proposal for financial AI technology. My associate dismissed it without bringing it to my attention. After today's demonstration, I've terminated that associate. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I felt a surge of vindication. Market conditions change. People who can't adapt get left behind. Indeed, which brings me to why I'm here. Whitmore Capital would like to lead a Series A round for your technology. We're prepared to offer $15 million at a pre-money valuation of $45 million. Alexander and I exchanged glances. It was more than we'd hoped for, but less than we deserved after today's demonstration. That's generous, I said carefully, but given the demonstrated superiority of our technology and the market response we've seen today, I think we can do better. Whitmore smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. What did you have in mind? $25 million at a pre-money valuation of $75 million, plus board representation and guaranteed autonomy over technical development. Done. The speed of his acceptance told me I could have asked for more, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about maximizing every dollar. It was about building something that would last, something that would prove that merit could triumph over manipulation. As we shook hands, my phone buzzed with a news notification. Zenith Corporation stock plummets after AI development scandal. The article included a screenshot from my stream and quotes from industry insiders about the implications of corporate IP theft in the tech sector. Derek's name wasn't mentioned directly, but anyone in the industry would be able to connect the dots. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, Alexander observed. Tomorrow's going to be profitable, Whitmore corrected. Miss Chen, I believe you're about to revolutionize how we think about financial prediction. And unlike some of my colleagues, I don't intend to make the mistake of underestimating you twice. As dinner wound down and the contracts were promised for morning delivery, I found myself thinking about the difference between the two versions of my life. In the first, I'd trusted Derek completely, believed in the power of love and partnership, assumed that merit would be recognized and rewarded. I'd died broke and betrayed, watching my life's work make someone else rich. In this life, I'd learned to trust but verify, to protect my interests while building relationships, to assume that people would act in their own best interests unless given compelling reasons to do otherwise, and I'd found partners who shared my values instead of exploiting my trust. One last question, Whitmore said as we prepared to leave. What's next for you? What's the bigger vision beyond financial prediction? I smiled. thinking about the algorithms I'd been developing in secret, the applications that went far beyond stock market analysis, the future I could see unfolding like lines of perfectly executed code. The same technology that can predict market movements can predict human behavior patterns, supply chain disruptions, political trends, climate impacts, disease outbreaks, anything that generates data and follows patterns. You're talking about predicting the future. I'm talking about understanding systems well enough to anticipate their behavior. Markets, societies, ecosystems, they're all just complex systems with identifiable patterns. And patterns, Mr. Whitmore, are what I do. As I walked back to my hotel that night, my phone continued buzzing with messages from reporters, investors, and former colleagues who'd suddenly remembered my existence. But the message that mattered most was from Jenna. I'm so proud of you. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into the best thing that ever happened to you. That's not revenge. That's alchemy. She was right. This wasn't revenge, not really. Revenge would have been petty, destructive, focused on tearing Derek down rather than building myself up. What I'd done was something far more powerful. I'd reclaimed my story. In my hotel room, I opened my laptop and began working on the next iteration of the algorithm. Not because I had to, not because someone was pressuring me or stealing from me, but because I wanted to. Because this was who I was when freed from the weight of betrayal and the fog of manipulation. My phone rang one last time that day. Derek's number appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. Maya? His voice was small, defeated. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I know it's too late, and I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I know you are, Derek. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your plan failed. You're sorry there were consequences for your actions. But are you sorry you did it? Silence stretched between us, and in that silence, I had my answer. I thought I was protecting us both, he said finally. I thought if I could just get the technology to market, prove its value, then we could both benefit. You thought you could steal my life's work and somehow make it noble by wrapping it in lies about protection and partnership. You thought I was too trusting, too naive, too in love to ever discover the truth, Maya. But here's what you never understood, Derek. Trust isn't weakness. Love isn't blindness. And being kind doesn't mean being stupid. You mistook my virtues for vulnerabilities, and that mistake cost you everything. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, probably sitting in some empty apartment, watching his world collapse in real time on every tech blog and financial news site. Is there anything I can do to make this right? You can learn from it. You can become the kind of person who builds instead of steals. You can find someone new and treat them with the respect you never showed me. But you can't unmake your choices, and you can't undo their consequences. I loved you, Maya. I still love you. No, Derek, you loved the idea of me. You loved having someone brilliant enough to create what you couldn't, trusting enough to share it freely, and naive enough to believe your lies about partnership. You loved my mind and my work and my blind faith in you. But you never loved me enough to respect me. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new battles to fight in the endless war between innovation and exploitation. But tonight, I just wanted to code. I opened a new project file and began typing, letting my fingers dance across the keyboard with the rhythm of someone finally free to create without fear. The algorithm that appeared on my screen was elegant, powerful, revolutionary, and completely, undeniably mine. 6 months later, the Apex Dynamics headquarters building gleamed in the San Francisco morning sun. 30 floors of glass and steel that housed what Fortune magazine had called the most disruptive fintech company of the decade. From my corner office on the 28th floor, I could see all the way to the bay, where the morning fog was just beginning to lift. Maya, you need to see this. Alexander burst into my office holding a tablet, his expression somewhere between amazement and vindication. I looked up from the code I'd been reviewing, the latest iteration of our prediction engine, which had just successfully anticipated a market correction that every other firm had missed. What now? Zenith Corporation just declared bankruptcy. I set down my coffee and took the tablet. The headline was stark and unforgiving. Tech giant Zenith falls, massive losses from failed AI division lead to Chapter 11 filing. The article detailed how Zenith stock had never recovered from the intellectual property scandal that had emerged 6 months ago. Without a viable AI strategy, they'd lost ground to competitors, hemorrhaged talent, and finally collapsed under the weight of investors' lost confidence. There's more, Alexander continued, scrolling down to show me a smaller headline. Former Zenith developer Derek Chen charged with corporate espionage. My breath caught. I'd known this was possible. Jenna had warned me that criminal charges might follow once the civil lawsuits started flying, but seeing it in black and white still felt surreal. Apparently, the FBI investigation turned up evidence that he'd stolen code from multiple sources, not just you. They're calling it a pattern of corporate theft spanning 3 years. I read through the details with a mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been pity. Derek hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built his entire career on a foundation of intellectual property theft. The house of cards had finally collapsed. Any regrets? Alexander asked, echoing his question from 6 months ago. I considered it honestly. Derek was facing up to 10 years in federal prison. His career was destroyed, his reputation in ruins, his future a series of legal proceedings and appeals. In my first life, this level of poetic justice would have felt like a fantasy too perfect to believe. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that he made the choices that led to this. But I don't regret protecting myself and my work. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Chen, Marcus Whitmore is here for your 11 o'clock. I glanced at the clock. Time to shift gears from the past to the future. Marcus entered with his usual confidence, but there was something different about his demeanor today. A deference that hadn't been there 6 months ago when he'd still been trying to assess whether I was a legitimate visionary or a lucky amateur. Maya, I hope you're sitting down for this. Should I be worried? On the contrary. He set a thick folder on my desk. Goldman Sachs wants to acquire Apex Dynamics. Their opening offer is $2.8 billion. I blinked. Even with our meteoric success, the number was staggering. $2.8 billion? Your algorithm has consistently outperformed every other prediction model in the market. Last month's anticipation of the semiconductor correction alone saved our investors over $400 million. They're not just buying a company, they're buying the future of financial prediction. Alexander whistled low. That's 10 times what we expected for an acquisition. It gets better, Marcus continued. They want you to head their new AI division. Unlimited budget, complete autonomy, equity package that would make you one of the youngest billionaires in tech. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of what he was offering. In my first life, I died broke and unknown. In this life, I was being offered wealth beyond imagination and the chance to reshape an entire industry. There's one condition, Marcus added. They want exclusive rights to the core algorithm. No. The word came out before I'd consciously decided to say it. Both men looked at me in surprise. Maya, Alexander said carefully, that's a lot of money to walk away from. It's not about the money, it's about the principle. The moment I sign exclusive rights to Goldman, I become an employee instead of an innovator. I become someone who created something amazing once instead of someone who continues to create amazing things. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. In my first life, I trusted someone else to value my work appropriately. I let someone else control my future. I gave away my power and got destroyed for it. I won't make that mistake again, no matter how many zeros they put on the check. What if we counteroffered? Marcus suggested. Keep the rights, license the technology. Now you're thinking like a real partner. I smiled at him. What did you have in mind? 5-year exclusive license for $2 billion. With renewal options and shared ownership of any improvements they develop using your base technology. Plus, I retain all rights to develop competing or complementary technologies independently. Of course! I looked at Alexander, who was grinning like someone who'd just won the lottery. What do you think? I think Derek Chen is probably watching this from his prison cell, wondering how different his life might have been if he'd chosen partnership over theft. The mention of Derek should have felt like a victory lap, but instead it just made me tired. Revenge was exhausting, even when it was justified. Building the future was more energizing than punishing the past. Set up the meeting with Goldman, I told Marcus, but make it clear that we're not selling our company. We're licensing our technology to a partner who respects our autonomy. After Marcus left, Alexander and I sat in comfortable silence, watching the city buzz with activity below. Somewhere out there, traders were using our algorithms to make better decisions. Investors were finding opportunities they would have missed, and the entire financial ecosystem was slowly becoming more efficient because of work that had started in my college dorm room years ago. You know what the best part is? Alexander said eventually. The billions of dollars? The fact that you did it right. You could have destroyed Derek out of spite. You could have taken Goldman's money and disappeared into obscurity. You could have become just another tech success story that burns bright and fades fast. Instead, you built something that matters, something that lasts, something that proves merit wins over manipulation when given a fair chance. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Saw the news about Derek's charges. Also saw the Goldman rumors. Call me. We need to discuss book deals. Your story is going to inspire a lot of women who've been stolen from and dismissed. Another message, this one from my college roommate. Holy shit, Maya. Forbes just named you one of the top 10 innovators under 30. Remember when you were crying over that asshole deleting your code? Look at you now. And one more from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Chen, this is Sarah Kim from MIT's Computer Science Department. We'd like to offer you an endowed chair in AI ethics and innovation. Your work on intellectual property protection in tech has inspired a whole new field of study. I showed the messages to Alexander, who shook his head in amazement. From stolen code to endowed chair in 6 months. That might be a record. It's not about speed, I said, but I was smiling. It's about direction. I spent my first life moving towards someone else's goals, building someone else's dreams, trusting someone else to value my contributions. This life, I'm moving toward my own future. My computer chimed with an email from Goldman's legal team, confirming the meeting for next week and outlining their revised proposal. $2 billion for a 5-year license, with options for renewal and partnership on future development. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having, but more importantly, it was recognition of value on my terms. I opened a new document and began drafting my response. As I typed, I thought about all the women who'd been stolen from, dismissed, or underestimated in this industry. This deal wasn't just about me. It was about proving that talent and determination could overcome betrayal and bias. The document that emerged was more than a contract negotiation. It was a manifesto about the value of authentic innovation, the cost of intellectual theft, and the power of refusing to accept less than your worth. You're changing the whole game, Alexander observed, reading over my shoulder. I'm just playing it better than I did the first time. As the afternoon wore on, calls came in from reporters wanting to interview the mystery AI genius who'd gone from unknown programmer to billionaire entrepreneur in 6 months. I turned them all down except one, a journalist from Wired who wanted to write about intellectual property protection in the age of AI. Why that one? Alexander asked. Because the story isn't about me getting revenge on Derek. It's about creating a world where the next woman with a brilliant idea doesn't have to choose between trust and self-protection. That evening, I was working late in my office when security called up to tell me I had a visitor. I wasn't expecting anyone, and most of my meetings were scheduled weeks in advance these days. Who is it? A Derek Chen. He says it's personal. I felt my heart rate spike, then force itself back to normal. I'd known this moment would come eventually. Derek had been released on bail pending trial, and despite the restraining order Jenna had helped me file, he'd probably found a way to get a message to me. Send him up, but have security escort him and wait outside my office. 5 minutes later, Derek walked through my door looking like a ghost of his former self. Prison orange had been replaced by an ill-fitting suit, but the real change was in his eyes. The confidence, the manipulation, the casual assumption of superiority, all of it was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse. Hello, Maya. Derek, I hear congratulations are in order. Federal charges are quite an achievement. He winced. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. Yes, you do. What do you want? To apologize, really apologize, not the half-hearted deflection I gave you 6 months ago, and to tell you that I'm pleading guilty. That surprised me. Your lawyer advised you to fight the charges. My lawyer doesn't have to live with what I did. I stole from you, Maya. I stole from 3 other developers. I built my career on lies and theft, and I convinced myself it was justified because I was charming enough to sell the vision. He sat down uninvited, and I let him because I was curious to see where this was going. I've been in therapy, he continued. Court-ordered, but it's helped me understand some things about myself, about how I justified hurting people I claimed to love. And what did you learn? That I was a coward. I was so afraid of not being good enough, of not being the genius everyone expected me to be, that I stole from people who actually were good enough. I convinced myself that your ideas were somehow mine too because we were partners, because I loved you, because I could present them better than you could. I listened without interrupting, watching him deconstruct himself with the thoroughness of someone who'd finally run out of lies to tell. The worst part is, I actually did love you. I loved your brilliance, your passion, your ability to see solutions that nobody else could see. But I loved those things about you in the same way someone might love a beautiful painting they wanted to steal. You loved what I could do for you. Yes. And I convinced myself that was the same as loving who you were. We sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who'd once planned a future together now separated by betrayal, federal charges, and the kind of success that only one of us had earned honestly. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because in about 6 months, I'm going to prison for 7 years. When I get out, you'll probably be running Goldman Sachs or NASA or who knows what. This is likely the last conversation we'll ever have, and I wanted it to be honest. What about the trial, your chances for appeal? There won't be a trial. I'm pleading guilty to all charges and cooperating with the investigation. It's the least I can do to try to make amends. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but there was nothing there except exhaustion and what seemed like genuine remorse. I'm glad you're pleading guilty, I said finally. Not because I want to see you suffer, but because it's the first honest thing you've done in years. I know I have no right to ask this, but I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. Carrying anger is like carrying poison. I forgave you months ago, Derek. Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to hatred was interfering with my ability to build something better. He looked genuinely surprised. You forgave me? Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting you again or minimizing what you did. It just means I refuse to let your choices continue controlling my life. Derek stood up slowly, looking around my office at the awards, the patents, the visible symbols of success he'd tried to steal. You built something incredible, Maya. Something that goes far beyond what I ever could have imagined when I was stealing your code. I'm genuinely proud of you, even though I have no right to be. You're right. You don't have that right. But thank you anyway. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think this version of you, the one who learned to protect herself, is going to change the world. After he left, I sat alone in my office, processing the conversation. It should have felt like victory, seeing Derek humbled and remorseful. But instead, it just felt like the final closing of a chapter I'd been ready to finish months ago. My phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? Better than expected. He's pleading guilty, which means no trial, no media circus, no having to relive everything in court. And how do you feel about seeing him? I considered the question honestly. Tired. Not angry, not vindicated, just tired. Like looking at something that used to matter and realizing it doesn't anymore. That's probably healthy. Probably. Are you still at the office? Just leaving. Want to grab dinner and celebrate the Goldman deal? Actually, I think I want to code for a while. I have an idea for something new. Something new? Maya, you just licensed technology that's going to make you a billionaire. What could you possibly need to build now? I was already pulling up my development environment, my fingers itching to create something that had never existed before. Something that helps other people protect their work the way I learned to protect mine. Something that makes intellectual property theft impossible instead of just punishable. A blockchain based code verification system? Among other things, think of it as an immune system for innovation. I could hear Alexander smiling through the phone. You know what, Maya? I think Derek was right about one thing. This version of you really is going to change the world. As I hung up and began coding, I thought about the difference between the two versions of my life. In the first, I'd been brilliant but naive, trusting but unprotected, innovative but ultimately disposable. In this second life, I'd learned to be brilliant and strategic, trusting but vigilant, innovative and indestructible. The code that flowed from my fingers that night was some of the best I'd ever written. Clean, elegant, revolutionary. It was technology that would make it impossible for the next Derek to steal from the next Maya, code that would protect innovation at the source instead of punishing theft after the fact. As the city lights twinkled below and the future stretched out before me like an infinite algorithm waiting to be executed, I realized that revenge had never been the point. Justice had been the point. Building something better had been the point. Proving that merit could triumph over manipulation had been the point. And I'd finally completely proven that point. The story was no longer about what Derek had stolen from me. It was about what I'd built in spite of him, what I'd learned because of him, and what I would create to protect everyone who came after me. I coded until sunrise, building tomorrow's defenses against yesterday's betrayals, secure in the knowledge that I'd not just survived my first life's destruction, I'd transformed it into this life's foundation. The girl who'd trusted Derek completely was gone. The woman who'd learned to trust herself completely had taken her place. And she was just getting started.